along and watching a lot of different events. And I'd say my thorn, and just to, again, keep it vague, I feel like there were some outside distractions slash political commentary related to the Olympics that I just felt like was not very necessary for the games, and that kind of killed the vibe a little bit, but overall pretty good.
Okay, so I did just realize those who are listening on the radio are completely fine. Those who are listening on YouTube, the mic was not being picked up for the start of that. So to recap, Eli really enjoyed Alyssa Liu, really did not enjoy Amber Glen's social media performance, and my apologies to the Zacks family for the less than nice things we're going to say about Canada. Yoni.
Well, hi, family. For me, the highlight was actually I'm gonna start with the low light, and that was probably this morning. Waking up early, I actually overslept and missed a little bit of the first part of the game. And then I woke up, I watched the end of the game, and I was so stressed. There were so many chances. I'll talk more about this in a little bit, but Canada had so many chances and they just couldn't convert. And then to lose in overtime was just so painful, especially coming off of the high of the three goal comeback against Finland. They were down 2-0 entering the third period, scored twice in the semifinals, looked like it was going to go to overtime, and then a Nathan McKinnon goal in the final minute to send the game. I was in Norris, and you can ask my friends. I was cheering like crazy. There were probably people who thought I was a little crazy, but I had fun.
I feel like the sports fans among us will definitely understand. Yeah, we've all gone crazy screaming ridiculously in a public place about sports at some point or another.
Have we?
Oh, you certainly
This
have.
was not my first time.
Probably.
Or at least I got texts from you crashing out watching some of the national championship games last year. But without further ado, let's move on to women's hockey, one of the big things that we are talking about this week. What a match in that gold medal game. U.S. beating Canada 2-1 in overtime. That's going to sound familiar very soon. Thanks to Megan Keller's backhanded flick. So just to start out, what or who impressed you most about this finals win for the Americans? Or if you'd like to talk about what disappointed you most out of the Canadians, feel free to do that as well.
All right, I can start on this one. I mean, I'm not like the biggest like hockey expert, but like going in, I was pretty familiar with a lot of the names on the women's hockey team. And I like coming to the Olympics. I remember talking about this on one of the earlier Icy Veins, like, oh, like this is a team that I really want to follow, and I did end up following them a lot, and I was really impressed throughout. And I mean, like obviously, just like super dominant from them, outscoring their opponents 33-2, and obviously when you talk about people that were impressive during that game for the U.S., obviously Megan Keller with that goal, Hillary Knight breaking the all-time Olympic goal-scoring record, Erin Frankel in the cage. But I'm going to talk about someone who I thought really impressed me, like just throughout the Olympics, was probably Caroline Harvey on the defense. She was named Olympic MVP, and just someone who like just from like watching was someone who just created a lot of like created so many opportunities, led the Olympics in points, but also just like generated so much even when it didn't show up on statistically. And just like her resume as a senior in college, like probably going to be the number one pick in the PWHL draft, Olympic MVP, Olympic gold medalist, and to like have probably the best defender in the world, like to have that like resume is, and kind of like build on that in the Olympics, was she was just someone that really impressed me throughout.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially like the college students are always, I feel like, one of the most fun storylines. Is what are they going to do next? Especially when you're seeing them kind of compete with those pros.
Yeah, I think the Hillary Knight equalizing goal is definitely going to be the moment that lives on with me from this game. Just with a shorthanded, or rather, pulling the goalie, throwing everything at Canada to try to get that equalizer. I'm also not the biggest hockey person, but my sense from the sport is that shot after shot after shot, right? Like it's really, really hard to score just because of the proportions of the goal and the players. And so to, be at the end of the game with 2.5 minutes left and you've been knocking on the door that entire time, looking for a moment of inspiration. And that's exactly what Hillary Knight came up with, just the precision, the deftness of that touch to deflect that shot over the keeper that's a gold medal winning moment.
Certainly.
I I think I have to give props to the Americans. They built one of the most dominant teams I have seen in an Olympics, 2 goals in the whole tournament. Aaron Frankel deserves all the credit in the world for that. But the other thing that deserves credit is the U.S. Defense Corps. They had the top 3 leading scorers in the tournament by points. And they also had this consistent pressure. They were giving up like defensive structure. Their defensive structure meant that they were giving up very few shots, and when they were very low chance from the outside. The only team that could really put pressure on them was Canada in that gold medal game. And I mean, obviously, it's the gold medal game. Like anything can happen. In the 2010 Olympics, Canada lost to the U.S. in the men's hockey opening round and then went on to beat them in the final in the gold medal game. So just anything can happen in the gold medal game, but outside of that, the US did a great job limiting their shots to the outside. But I think for Canada, one thing that's got to change is this team has got to start building younger. They brought the oldest team to this tournament, and they didn't have a lot of the foot speed that they needed, and you could kind of see that a little bit on the goal. Like if you watch the goal, Megan Keller did a great. It was a great play by Megan Keller, but it was also made in part because Canada just lost the skating race and could not recover.
Yeah, absolutely. Big aspect of it, and I feel like that's something that we're often seeing is do you build young or do you build old? And when you're seeing so many of the big storylines from the Olympics in every sport, just being these teenagers that are coming out of nowhere and doing these amazing things, it's a balance that you got to find. And while that last match was a nail biter, Team USA did go a combined 7-0 across their matches, 33-2 scoring margin over the entirety of the games. And the PWHL, as we started touching on a bit, the premier women's hockey league in the U.S., has only existed for 3 years. So looking forward, you're seeing this American dominance on the global stage. What does this say for a sport that is really truly up and coming at this professional level?
I will just say there have been other professional women's hockey leagues before. They didn't usually last very long. A lot of that was due to like labor fighting, which the PWHL has done a good job managing so far. But I think that women's hockey is becoming a stronger presence in college. We're seeing a lot of these college stars like building brands for themselves, and we're seeing a lot of the players really start building their own brands. Like we're seeing a lot of Layla Edwards and Abby Murphy and like Taylor Heisey just kind of building their brands away from the game. And I think that's gonna end up being good because it's allowing them to succeed on their own, and it's making people look up to them as role models, as people have started to do for other professional athletes like Caitlin Clark. And then we're going to see this domino effect where we're seeing going to see an increase in youth participation, which is going to lead to an increase in like participation globally in the US. And I think that the US and Canada are going to become ever more dominant in men's and in women's hockey, and I don't know if the rest of the world can keep up.
Yeah, could be a real true 1-2 punch going forward.
Yeah, I'll just quickly add that this was, according to The Athletic, the most watched women's hockey game on record in the United States, peaking at 7.7 million viewers in overtime, averaging 5.3 million. So, in terms of the long-term development of the game, we've seen a lot of women's sports have these moments where there's a huge event. It garners a lot of interest. We see a lot of rise in youth participation. So, I think the long-term health of the game will be hugely benefited by this moment for U.S. women's hockey.
Yeah, and I think like specifically for American women's hockey, I know it's going to be really big for the growth of the PWHL because currently the PWHL in its third season, it's doing a kind of like expansion tour where it's playing in different cities and trying to like gauge which cities are the best cities to expand to get new teams. And I think we're kind of seeing this trend of like Canadian cities getting and their games being a little better attended just because the sport is bigger in Canada. But I think this US team, especially like Yoni said, with a lot of like really big, like marketable personalities like on social media, like outside of hockey, I think that'll be really good for drawing this newer American crowd. I mean, there was a PWHL game in DC that broke the women's hockey attendance record in the US, and that's going to be broken at TD Garden after in a few weeks as well. So just I think in terms of like drawing a specific American crowd, I think this Olympic gold medal would be really big for that. I also think in terms of like the talent coming into the next PWHL draft, like Caroline Harvey, Layla Edwards, Abby Murphy, Tessa Jenke, just people who have really built names for themselves at the Olympics and are like coming in and just adding to the talent of the league. I kind of see it like not obviously on a smaller scale. I kind of see it having the impact for the PWHL the way that the 2024 WNBA draft class had for that league, like a Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese, and just Cameron Brink, just a super stacked class.
Yeah, and I think one more thing that we haven't really touched on is this isn't the end of like US Canada for 4 years. They do a rivalry series most years where the teams will play each other, and so this rivalry is one that's like building up in anticipation of the Olympics versus like I know we had the Four Nations in men's hockey, but before that they hadn't played best on best hockey in 8 years, and that's not going to happen as often now because of the Olympics returning and the World Cup of Hockey coming back. But this US and Canada have a chance to take the momentum from this Olympics and turn it into something that is going to create an expansion, like explosion of this women's hockey game in the future.
Show of hands, who would watch the US versus Canada in a year? Women's hockey. All right, well, we got 4 fans already, and I think that is saying a lot about the future of the game. Let's move over now to the men's side, as we were having a little deja vu, anyone. This match also ended. The U.S. beat Canada 2-1 in overtime, tied 1-1 going in to win gold. It also marked the first gold medal win for the Americans since the iconic Miracle on Ice. And many seem to think this is causing a hockey boom in the U.S. The more people I'm talking to, I keep hearing, oh, everyone's a hockey fan now all of a sudden after the Olympics. So going forward, what is the significance of this win for the U.S.? What does it mean for the Canadians? And what was your biggest takeaway from the contest?
I'll go first. I'll say that Bill Guerin was right. In roster construction, a lot of people criticized him for not taking Jason Robertson or not taking Cole Caulfield, but what ended up happening was the 2 players that he took were Vincent Trocheck and JT Miller instead of them. I don't think that it was instead of them, but they ended up being part of this penalty kill unit that went perfect in the Olympics. And against a team like Canada that's running McKinnon, Crosby, McDavid, and Cale Makar out there all on the same power play, which is like 4 of the best players in the world, sheer terror, and the U.S. stood on their heads and didn't give up a single goal, and I think that was part of the difference today.
Yeah, absolutely. I was really intrigued by, we saw a comment after this game from Nathan McKinnon, which was getting a lot of traction. He said, "You be the judge of who is the better team today." And I think, by a lot of standards, Yoni's absolutely right. The U.S. defense, especially Hellebuck in goal, is absolutely standing on his head. But I think we see this notion, in soccer a lot, in hockey as well, of like who is the better team based on who's controlling the territory, who's having more shots. And I think it's sort of a little bit reliant on the assumption that the goalkeeper isn't part of the team, because, obviously, if the goalkeeper is, yeah, I mean, if the goalkeeper is making a ton of good saves, obviously, if you're Canada, you feel aggrieved. Especially that one on Devin Tays, who looked like just a clear tap in from about a foot out, and Hellebuck sticks the stick out just to deflect it away. One of the best saves I've ever seen. Yeah, you're obviously, if you're the Canadians, you feel aggrieved because you're creating a lot of good chances. You're getting a lot of good shots on goal, but ultimately the goalkeeper is a huge part of the team. And if he's making those plays, then I don't know if you can say you're the better team when the other team's most important player is the best player on the ice.
Yeah, Yanyan was pointing me out there a little bit. I am famous for just like thinking that the goalie in pretty much every sport is the most important person on the field, court, ice, what have you, at all times. Last year I was very much on the Shea Dolce should have won the Tour-a-thon train. But I digress.
Yeah, I mean, I also think the U.S. played better, like, when it mattered the most. Like, they just, even though Canada, for a lot of the game, like, yes, they did have the momentum for, I think, the majority of the game, shooting 42 shots compared to the U.S.'s 28. But just in terms of, like, overtime, Jack Hughes pulling through and getting that goal. First off, shout out New Jersey legend Jack Hughes. But also just the Canada again had so many chances. They had that 5v3 opportunity, the goal that by the open cage, Macklin Celebrini and Connor McDavid both having fast break opportunities and not being able to convert those at the right time. Like no matter how many good looks you're gonna have, like if you don't convert on them, that's just not gonna matter. And I think it was a game, and I think hockey's like this, where just one small change and the game could have been totally different. And I think US was able to capitalize on that more. Also, shout out a lot of people talking about the game winner, but also shout out Matt Goldie's goal at the start of the game. I think that was like one of the most impressive goals I've seen at the Olympics. Just like breaking the kind of like the breakaway and then that puck being stopped by the defenders and then him like reaching out with his stick to grab it and then scoring. That was just super cool goal to see.
Absolutely. Well, to wrap up our men's hockey discussion, let me just go ask going forward. Is this enough to create a sustainable hockey boom? And I think, Yoni, this might be a little more on you, but for those who aren't hockey diehards like yourself who are just watching the Olympics, what do you want them to know about the NHL if they're going to follow that going forward?
Yeah, so I've been thinking a lot about this question, and I think the first part of this is like hockey is already becoming more towards like the shifting the postseason and the trade deadline when we get back. The roster freeze that they had for the Olympics is over in like 3.5 hours. It ends at 11:59 tonight, and players can start getting moved right away. The trade deadline is coming up in a couple of weeks, and that's going to create a lot of action and a lot of players playing on new teams. So the hockey isn't going to be like as good as it was in the Olympics, probably for the rest of the year, but that's because it's the best players all on one team. But I also think that you're going to see an increase in the intensity of hockey as the buyers play each other more and they're fighting for playoff seeding. The Eastern Conference is still wide open. Like it's anyone's game. And as soon as we reach the playoffs, there's going to be another flip. It's going to be the atmosphere is going to be as intense as it was during the national tournament. The players are going to be competing with more intensity, and there's going to be players that just kind of come out of nowhere who you don't expect to be good. Like a lot of these guys on the Olympic teams are going to be playing against each other now. They're going to be playing against players that they were on the same line with in the Olympics in like 2 days, and they're going to be playing against each other in the playoffs for the Stanley Cup. And it's going to be great hockey. It's going to be intense. It's going to be passionate. It won't be the same level, but it'll be close enough that I think it will still be enjoyable.
Anything else either of you would like to add? All right, well, we will move on then to Eli's favorite segment of the program. We're going to talk about Alyssa Liu. She's misspelled on the rundown, but I fixed it on the actual graphic. So Alyssa Liu won gold for Team USA in the women's individual figure skating, and this comes after she announced her retirement at 16 following the Beijing Olympics and made this comeback in 2024. Also the first gold for the U.S. in women's figure skating since 2002. Great song. So what were the keys that made Liu so successful in your eyes, and how did she really separate herself from her competitors?
Yeah, well, this has been talked about ad nauseum and the reflections on Liu's gold medal, but it's so striking in a sport with such a toxic coaching environment where, skaters are trained from the ages of 10 to not eat anything, to, go to bed at 7 p.m., to have these absolutely brutal discipline training regimens and to have unbelievable pressure put on them. To see a skater with so much freedom, with so much joy, with so much self-control and self-confidence in her skating. Liu walked away from the sport at 16 years old after saying that it was, the pressure was too much, the burden, the lifestyle was too much for her. She had broken out as a 13-year-old, became the youngest woman to land a triple axel, the first woman to land both a quad and a triple axel in the same program as a 13 and 14-year-old. Took a few years away from the sport, finally comes back, becomes a world champion, comes into the Olympics and comes into this free skate in third place and just has the absolute skate of her life. And I was actually watching this without sound during the middle of a class. And obviously figure skating without sound is, quite a different experience because so much of it is about the rhythm,
Yes, we
and
heard with your poem that you
that's
recited last week.
exactly that's right. So actually, I can't say that I've been watching this program coming into the Olympics, so I didn't even know what the song was. But watching without sound, it's so much about the rhythm and how the body movements and the jumps and the spins connect to the soundtrack. I didn't have that, but even that being said, just looking, at the joy in her face, the perfect execution of all the elements, all the jumps, and even just the last minute post the jumps, with her more choreographed component element of the program. I actually had to hold back tears in the middle of my class at the end of it because I could just tell it was such a perfect skate.
Very different reaction from Yoni freaking out about hockey.
Yeah.
So,
And obviously the two Japanese skaters go after it. It ends up being very close, but that was truly a gold medal skate. And when I went back and watched it after, I mean, it just enhanced the performance so much with that sort of cutout snippet from the longer version of Donna Summer's MacArthur Park. One of the most fun and joyful figure skating programs I've ever seen, and a wholly deserved gold medal for Alyssa Liu.
on the notion of having fun too, there was some discrepancy about her dropping the F bomb on air after she had that skate. I kind of loved it, especially for a support that's so buttoned up. But I will let you guys take over.
Yeah, I mean, I think Alyssa Liu's performance kind of ties back to the discourse about how is figure skating becoming too much of a technical sport. I think this is more of an issue on the men's side, with a lot of people were criticizing Ilya Malinin for having too much technical his programs being too technical and not artistic enough. They said the same thing about my personal favorite skater Nathan Chen, and he got a lot of criticism for that too. But I think Alyssa Liu, even though yes, her technical elements were amazing, I think what people remembered the most was, like Eli said, the joy, the artistry, and so many of the most viral clips from that performance were not about her jumps. It was just about like how she flowed throughout the performance. And I think that goes to show that figure skating, like, you can't just get lost in the weeds of technical details. Like, the way that you put it together and the execution, like, sometimes is even more important than that.
All right. Well, we're going to bring it to a close with one final little tidbit here, before we hand it off to her take. But favorite Olympic retrospective moment. There were so many athletes that none of us had heard of going into this. So just give me one athlete you'd never heard of prior, 30 seconds. What did you like out of them, and why are they a favorite of yours now?
I'm going to go with Mikhail Shidorov, the men's singles figure skating champion. I watched his routine, mesmerized.
I'm going to go with Choi Gaon, the winner of the women's halfpipe, over Chloe Kim. Obviously, not what we were expecting going in, but the story of Chloe Kim's protege, who she had taken in and had been training since she was 7 years old, eventually coming up to beat her in the Olympics, was a pretty cool story, even if, at the expense of an American.
I am going to go with I'm blanking on her name, but it was the American skier that went right after Lindsey Vonn.
Breezy Johnson.
Breezy Johnson. It was before she crashed. I thought someone else went because Breezy was in the winner's chair during the crash.
Right.
I'm like blanking on who it was, but
her, yes.
Yeah, just her. Like it's not like the name wasn't
Yes.
like her name. Like, obviously, I should remember her name, and that's a fault on me for not. But what stood out for me was that was like a 25-minute delay, and it was one of her teammates. She had like just come back from a miraculous injury, and now to have another one and be like airlifted away, and then to just have to go back up there and follow the same course that she did, while also being aware that like 20 minutes before you, someone like ended their skiing career, is just, it takes some incredible mental capacity, and I'm gonna have to appreciate that. I'm probably gonna follow her once I remember her name to see where she goes.
Yes. I'm gonna close this out. I was watching Skeleton at about 1 a.m. last night. Yanyan watched me crash out over this. But there were these two Danish siblings, the Johansson siblings, and they were going very early on. They didn't place highly, but it was the fact that the sister was down over a second in time, which for Skeleton is an obscene amount. Usually it's these fractions of a second difference. She was down over a full second from the previous first place run at that time, and her brother made up over a second of time just slowly inching away at every single checkpoint, and then they ended up just getting over by hundredths of a second. I loved watching it. They didn't finish either, but they beat all the other teams after the brother helped to carry the sister after an incredible comeback, and I love to see that. And well, with that, I got my first opportunity to talk about Skeleton this quarter. We will send it off to her take. Brielle and Chelsea will take you